All right, so in this one, I'm going to be making this ancient Chinese temple village render right here. Heads up, I will be using this paid pack of models you can see here, but this is a pretty realistic workflow of mine. To be honest, most of the time I don't model everything from scratch, and I am kit bashing quite often, so you will be seeing my authentic actual workflow here. So with that said, I'll just show you the most important parts that made this come together, and we'll just get on with the video. Okay, so I'm just starting this one off with some stairs. I'm just adding a floor and then getting the camera zoomed out a little bit, and then right away adding in a cube, scaling that way down to the size of roughly 1 step. And then I'm just putting that a bunch of times in a row and then changing the scale a little bit each time. So it's kind of like a random scale for each step. And then I'm just duplicating that upwards. They're all separate objects so that I can actually go in. I'm just going to stack it one more time, and you'll see I can actually go in here, select one row of those, and then actually they're all separate objects, but I can go into edit mode all at the same time and then just grab the vertices on the end of 2 of those objects and just slide them both along at the same time. So that's the method I've been using to get kind of random offset stairs like this. And then here I'm just doing a randomized transform just to randomize the rotation a little bit. Then I'm going into Quixel Bridge, grabbing a rock texture, doing a quick Smart UV project, and then just copying that to just duplicating that same thing to the other side as well. And then here I'm going into that Chinese temple pack and then grabbing one of these like modular wall pieces here, which are meant to be arrayed or repeated a bunch of times in a row. So I'm just grabbing that in here, lining it up with the scene and getting kind of this is almost like a block out stage where I'm just kind of getting a feel for how the entire scene is going to fit together. So I'm not worrying too much about small, tiny little details here. I'm more worried about just the overall layout and structure of the scene. And then right here, I'm just switching that wood texture that the pack comes with for the stone texture that I just got from Quixel. I just wanted this to be more of a dark kind of vibe, so that's why I just decided to switch that out entirely, so it's not red wood anymore. It's just like it doesn't really make sense, but it's a stone material on that, just for something kind of dark, and it fits. And then dropping in more models from the pack, these kind of roof things here. And then I tried going crazy with it, but I didn't end up duplicating it that much upward at this point, but I'm still just trying out different ideas at this stage. And then I wasn't really sure what to put in the middle, so you can see me kind of messing with some different ideas here with different weird booleans and stuff. So I ended up just adding a cylinder. Again, I think I tried some other weird boolean setup here just to see if I could get some sort of inspiration for some weird shape, but I ended up just going with a basic cylinder, deleting the 2 middle faces, and then if you press Alt E, you can extrude faces along normals and just extrude that inwards. And then I dropped in one more model from this same pack here, which is this, I don't really know what this is, but some weird gate thing. This one's not really like historically accurate, it's more fantasy, but still cool to have in the pack. Anyways, stone texture on that, and then I'm just adding in a spotlight here to get the basic lighting kind of set up. So if you've been watching my channel, you know I love spotlights, and this is no exception here. So I'm just going really bright, full blend on the fall off, and then increasing the radius so that it's nice and soft as well. And then in the world settings, I'm just disconnecting the background so it's fully pitch black, and then adding in some volume as well. So I'm just doing that with a cube, scale that over the entire scene so it covers everything, and then display as bounds, and then just scale that to cover up the light as well. And then I'm going into the shader editor for the object, new material, delete the principled, add a volume scatter, plug it into the volume, lower the density, and then crank up the anisotropy a little bit. The same procedure that I do in every single render. And then yeah, nice amount of volume in here, and that'll come in handy later on as well. And then I'm also just adding an area light to fill in those really, really dark shadows that the spotlight is not reaching at all, so that it's not just pitch black. So there's a little bit of ambient light in here. So that's my strategy that I like. And then I'm just adding a plane in the back, throwing on a sky image onto that plane. These are just pictures that I took on actually just my iPhone. So I'm just plugging that into the emission color on that plane. That's going right here. And then I also plugged that into the alpha so that the dark parts of the image are actually transparent with just a black background behind it. And then the light parts are the only thing they're going to come through. So it makes the sky look a lot more dramatic, especially when it's going through volume like this. It just really increases the punch. You can also run that into the emission strength too. That's another option. And then yeah, I'm just trying to fill this out and get more roofs and stuff in here. So I'm dropping in more models from the pack. And by the way, if you are curious about this pack, this is something I've been working on the last couple of weeks for everyone inside the Cyber Environments course. So if you have that or you buy it within the next 3 days of this video being live, you'll get this pack as a free bonus. So take advantage of that if you want it. There is a link below. Duplicating a bunch of these things upwards and just, scaling them down as they get higher and higher up. This is maybe not the most realistic thing ever, but again, I'm not going for realism here. I'm just going for something that's fun and cool. So I'm okay with kind of exaggerating things or going a little bit, in the fantasy direction and going a bit crazy with stuff like that, where it's maybe not necessarily 100% accurate, but as long as it looks cool and it's not like offensive or anything, I'm fine with it, And then I was just going really crazy with the lighting here and just trying this weird setup with the light fall off node going into a color ramp. I didn't really end up using that. I think the final lighting setup was actually just a basic spotlight, so pretty similar to what I had in the beginning. But in this middle stage here, I did have a kind of weird situation with just trying some different lighting setups. I cut out a bunch of that in the recording, but yeah, I tried out a bunch of different setups. And then I decided to model some very basic little pieces of tiny debris just by beveling this little cube a bunch of times and doing some variations of that. Put the rock texture on that little collection there, and then I subdivided the ground plane a bunch of times like this so that I can weight paint it later on. And then I'm going into geometry nodes over here. So I'm just doing a basic scattering setup here in geometry nodes. There's a bunch of ways to do this with particle systems or add-ons or geometry nodes or whatever. I'm not going to go into detail exactly how to set this up because there's plenty of tutorials on YouTube that will teach you very easily how to do it. But basically, I'm just taking those rock particles from before and then weight painting that into the crevices and areas where it would look like it would naturally build up over time. So I'm just trying to avoid even distribution of rocks across the entire floor. I'm trying to have it in clusters in places where it would make sense for it to build up over time and not be all evenly throughout the whole thing. And then I'm just doing a random scale and rotation, making it tiny, and just brushing it into all the places that seem like they should be. And then I use the normal into a separate color with the blue output. That's being multiplied into the density on the stairs only. And that I just found was a nice way to get rid of it from scattering it onto the side faces. Basically, when you do that, it'll isolate only the top faces. You can use that in a texturing setup too. Anyways, here I am dropping in another model from this pack, a giant gateway thing here. Those big boxes you saw there were just cubes that I put in to block some light that are just out of the camera view. And then it was at this point that I started really liking the amount of detail that I was getting in here. So you can see me just duplicating this one detailed model a bunch of times throughout here. And I found it was quite helpful to just fill out detail in a very, easy way, just getting this one thing in here repeated. And then these are some models, free models from Sketchfab, which are from my last video. So you can, if you want to see how I got these and set them up, you can go there. But they're all just free CC0 from Sketchfab. So I'm dropping in just some pots and cauldrons and statues and just some interesting decorations to help fill up the empty space at this point. At this stage I was pretty happy with where it was going, but it was just missing interesting props and interesting detail. And that's where models like this can come in really handy. And then I'm just dropping in more free models here. These ones are from the Polyhaven add-on. You can get them for free from their website. So I'm just dropping in as much stuff as I can here, again, that feels like it belongs sort of in this environment. And if you do that enough, eventually it'll start looking like well decorated and like it's actually kind of more alive. I liked these wooden dock models that I brought in from the Polyhaven add-on too. So I just took these realized instances because it brought it in as a collection, and then just took that, and it comes with a bunch of ropes and stuff on it. So a model like this is very handy for scenes where you just want to add more detail and life, and like, a walkway kind of thing is a really easy way to do that. So you can see as soon as I drop that in here, it starts adding just another level of detail, which is really nice to see at this point. And then you can see these wooden dock models look really nice in combination with like the Chinese temples. So that was a very easy but very nice solution that I found in this one. And then I'm just duplicating that a bunch of times throughout here, as many times as I can until it starts looking overused, and then I'll dial it back from there usually. But you can kind of squeeze a lot out of the same model by duplicating it a bunch of times, because a lot of the time it's hard to tell that it's repeating. And then I'm just adding some basic little tiles, which are just squares, some kind of broken tiles, duplicating that around a bunch of times. Again, trying to just layer on different pieces and create a really three-dimensional foreground, and that's going to help with the detail in the whole scene. And then at this point, there wasn't really much else I did. I, deleted the center archway thing there, the center gateway, added some of these rope or like line things hanging here. I just put a random texture on it that's like sort of looked like a rope. It wasn't even a proper texture, but you can't even see what it is, so it doesn't matter. And yeah, I really like how I was looking at this point, like with all these different models coming together. Now we're getting tons of detail, which is really nice to see. And then from here, I just did some basic edits in Photoshop, some exposure adjustments, boosted the saturation a little bit, added some clarity and some kind of punchiness with that, grain, sharpening, and that was pretty much it. There were some other minor things I did, but that's like 80% of what I did in Photoshop was like the camera raw filter, as you can see here. And that was it. So that's the final render, and hopefully you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching.